All right, so that slideshow should be up on your screen there now. So we're going to cover off a few of the more well-known scams that are kind of occurring here in the province that we're aware of. So here's kind of some of the things that we're going to go over. We'll be covering a variety of common scams and frauds to be aware of and how you can protect yourself. And we hope that by the end of our presentation, you'll have a little bit of knowledge that you need to spot and potentially stop some of these common scams that you'll encounter. So today we're going to cover off the changing nature of frauds and scams, how some of the bad apples that you may encounter, how to spot, and to stop some of these common scams, a little bit about how frauds can happen to anyone, and then we'll go over some key takeaways and what you can do if you get scammed, and we'll give you folks a little bit of time to ask some questions at the end. So a little bit about the Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority of Saskatchewan. We are Saskatchewan's financial regulatory body, but we oversee a significant number and different pieces of legislation in our respective divisions. So I'll let Harvey speak to his aspect of it, but I know in the Consumer Protection Division, we cover off 13 different pieces of legislation, and we oversee those legislations through licensing, registration of certain regimes, auditing, compliance. We perform market conduct and complaint handling, and we provide some enforcement as well. And of course, on the side, we also do a fair bit of educational pieces, which is what we're doing here today. Sorry, my mic and camera seem to lock up on me there for a second.
It's 1 minute to one.
There we go. Okay, so the changing landscape of frauds and scams. So it stands to reason here that we've reached kind of the modern area of technology here, where the internet has given fraudsters a new set of tools to target people. And as we know, the internet allows them a certain amount of anonymity and distance and speed, and it allows violators and fraudsters to reach victims worldwide. So you might be getting defrauded or scammed by someone who's not even in the same country or continent as you. It leaves little trace of their activity, and they can create instant investment companies on websites in a matter of hours, and they can look to be quite legitimate. So sometimes unwittingly, victims can feel that they're actually dealing with a local business or a legitimate business even, when in fact, they might be dealing with someone who is looking to commit fraud. So some of the bad apples that you might encounter, we do have certain professions in the province of Saskatchewan that have to follow specific guidelines. Some of these include, as you see on the slide here, direct sellers. So that's your door-to-door salesman that will come knocking at your door to try and sell you goods and services. Collection agents, who are charged with the duties of collecting on debts that a person might owe that they've defaulted on. And vehicle dealers. So we're going to cover some of the tips and tricks so you're prepared if you have interaction with someone from these professions that might be attempting to perform some fraudulent behavior. And of course, not every collection agent or vehicle dealer or door-to-door salesman is a fraudster, but it's important to be aware of how scammers can use the disguise of some of these professions in order to appear legitimate. So we'll start with direct sellers. So a direct seller is a person who goes from house to house, selling or offering for sale or soliciting orders for the future delivery of goods or services. I'll also point out that they don't just go door to door. Under our legislation, they can also perform direct sales through the phone, although cold calling is a little bit less common than having the person physically knock at your door. And of course, given that it's 2022, we also have some direct sellers that are starting to reach out through spam mail, through electronic means. So as you'll see from some of the points on the slide here, direct sellers do need to be licensed to operate, and they should be able to provide you with proof of this. So if someone comes knocking at your door saying, hey, we're selling alarm systems for homes, we'd like to sign you up for a package, they're performing a direct sale, but you should be able to ask them, do you have a valid license to perform direct sales?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Makes sense. Oh, good. Yeah, oh, good.
And they should be able to say yes.
Oh, yeah. He needs only one.
And some other important points about direct sellers is they should never be requiring cash only. So that should be a red flag if you have someone coming to your door to perform a direct sale. And to be sure to take your time. So when someone comes to your door and they're trying to sell you a product, chances are it's going to involve a contract or a purchase agreement. So it's extremely important that you take your time, that you don't rush to sign anything. And sometimes it can be a little bit difficult because, as you see from the third point there, it says don't be swayed by high pressure sales tactics. And I mean, these guys want to make the sale, right? And as the old saying goes, time is money. And that's basically the premise on which they operate. So the more doors they knock on and the more contracts they get signed up, the better the money they make, right? So they're going to be saying, okay, well, you know what? Just sign here. And you should never just sign there. You should always take the time to read everything and be certain of what you're signing for. Don't fall for pushy or aggressive tactics. Keep in mind and remember that it's your home and your decision. So if someone comes knocking at your door, uh, feel free to say no. You're under no obligation, right? So take the time to think about it. Consult a family friend or a member of your family and run it by them. Hey, this person came and tried to sell this to me today. What are your thoughts on it? Right? And make sure that you're well informed. What I'll also point out is our website, the FCAA website, has a 411 function where you can check and confirm the licensing status of a direct seller. So if, say, ABC Alarm Company comes to your door to sell you a monitoring package and you want to confirm whether or not they're properly licensed as a direct seller, you can go on FCAA 411, you can type ABC Monitoring Company, and it'll show up if they are licensed. Make sure to get help from family and friends to be certain that you're understanding your contract, what you may be agreeing to, and what it'll cost you. And don't feel pressured to buy right away. It's easier to consider your options and rather than agree to get the guy to leave or just say yes in order to be polite. And then trying to cancel, this is much more difficult than just simply saying, no, I'm not ready for this now. I'm going to say no. I'm going to think about it and you're free to come back. You can do something like that instead. Under the Direct Sellers Act, you do have the right to cancel your transaction anytime up to 10 days after you receive a copy of your signed contract. And you don't have to explain why. But as I said, obviously it's a lot easier to take time to think about it and be informed before you sign than trying to cancel after the fact. So next we'll look at collection agents here. So this is someone who collects debts, usually through phone calls. And much like direct sales, they need to be licensed to operate in Saskatchewan. And just to be clear, all these licensing requirements are done through our office. And they also have a strict number of guidelines that they have to follow in order to operate in Saskatchewan. And the interesting thing with collection agents is that we've got them from all over the country operating in Saskatchewan. So you may have a collection agent who's actually located in Ontario who will be calling you to collect on debt from something that's incurred in Saskatchewan. But that Ontario company still needs to be licensed in Saskatchewan to operate. So that's something important to know. And some of you may have heard horror stories. Collection agents can be quite pushy and quite aggressive. Ultimately, their job is to collect the money on that debt, but they shouldn't be contacting you with such a frequency as to become harassing. So for example, if the collection agent is calling you every 5 minutes or tying up your phone lines at work, that can be considered a form of harassment under the Collection Agents Act, and that's something where our office can step in and intervene. So as per that third point on this slide here, they're not allowed to harass you. Obviously, some easy things to prevent fraud and scams is never provide your credit card information or your personal information to someone who has called you. And it is against the law for collection agents to be contacting you on Sundays, holidays, or between the hours of 9 p.m. at night and 8 a.m. in the morning. Okay, and next here we'll look at vehicle dealers. Now, a vehicle dealer means a person who is carrying on the business of a vehicle dealership and sells vehicles to consumers. Now, under the Consumer Protection and Business Practices Act, vehicle dealerships are supposed to be licensed to carry on this business. There are instances where people are unlicensed vehicle dealers, and we've nicknamed these folks curvers because they're basically selling the vehicle off the curb and it's being done illegally. So this is a fraud to watch out for. Um, Curbing is unlawful, and the issue that it presents to you as consumers is if you're buying a secondhand vehicle from a person who's a curber, you don't have a lot of the protections that are afforded by our legislation if something happens that that vehicle is not roadworthy, or if there's something significantly wrong with it, or they don't have all the same disclosure requirements as a licensed vehicle dealer would have. But when you are buying from a licensed vehicle dealer, so one of the dealerships you would see, you need to watch out for hidden fees. So they have a prescribed fees that they are allowed to charge, documentation fees and things of that sort. But sometimes there will be fees hidden into the purchase agreement, which you need to keep an eye out for. Don't feel pressured to purchase extra coverage packages or costly additions, because this is part of what they do, right? They want to inflate that price as much as they can, because this is how they make their money, right? So a lot of times they'll be pushing you and they'll say, well, it's good for peace of mind to have this added warranty and this added coverage in case something breaks down on your car, and all of a sudden you're paying a significant amount of money more above the purchase price of your vehicle. And you don't have to feel obligated to accept any of these things. You can feel free to say no. Um, Much like a direct sales contract, you want to make sure that you're reviewing all your documents before you sign them. And also, like a direct sales contract, don't be afraid to put some thought into your purchase and return at a later time. I know the last brand new vehicle I purchased, I went there and I test drove it twice on two separate occasions before I finally made my decision. And there again is where you want to avoid that pushiness where some salespeople might be like, okay, well, look, you test drove this vehicle twice. Okay, do you like the car? Well, yeah, I like the car. Okay, well, if you like it, you've test driven it, you're obviously satisfied with it, let's go sign some documentation. Okay, you don't have to fall for those pressure tactics for sales, right? You can feel free to leave, think about it, and come back to it at a different time. Vehicle dealers are required by legislation to provide you with all the material information that's known and that should be known by them
Mm.
before you purchase that car. So, some examples I can give you is if the vehicle that they're selling you used to be a taxi cab or an emergency vehicle, these are things that they have to disclose to you. If there's something wrong with the car, if there's something that will require repair, they need to let you know that before you purchase it. And by law, they have to provide you with a copy of the vehicle identification number search from SGI that shows that that vehicle hasn't been involved in any accidents, hasn't come from outside of province, things of that sort. So those are some of the regimes that my division covers. So now we'll start talking about scams a little bit. So we'll start by sharing some examples of fake scams, and we'll see if you guys can identify some of the red flags associated with them. And then we'll discuss how to protect yourself a little bit after identifying some of these warning signs. So here's a telemarketing scam. So Lana gets a call from an excited telemarketer who's offering her an opportunity to book a vacation at an extremely low rate. The telemarketer says this is an opportunity offered to only some of their most valued, frequent flyers for a limited time only. All Lana needs to do to claim the offer is to provide her credit card and her birthday over the phone. So, what would be some of the red flags associated with that? And I think that anyone who looks at this scenario would recognize that first and foremost, well, if it were me personally, I'm not a frequent flyer with booking vacations. So, that would be a red flag for me automatically. But outside of that, there's also the fact that they're saying all you need to do to claim this offer is to provide your credit card and your birthday over the phone. Huge red flags, huge red flags. You should never provide your credit card information or any pertinent tombstone information about yourself to anybody over the phone. So some of the common red flags for a telemarketing scam like this is that they'll promise you anything from prizes to cheap vacations, great returns on investments, things of that nature. And often these opportunities are framed as limited time offers, and it puts you on the spot and kind of pressures you into accepting them right away, which is often how a lot of people will get taken. Sometimes the caller will tell you to keep the offer a secret. That's a huge red flag. So if it's such a great offer and I'm so lucky to be getting it, of course I'm going to want to brag about it, right? So why should I need to keep it secret? And a lot of times they'll use complicated jargon and language, and you'll be bombarded with so many details. And that's usually meant to confuse you into showing uh, kind of fooling you into believe that they're official. And one popular scam involves a caller offering to apply for a low interest rate credit card on a senior's behalf for a fee. Well, no one can apply for a credit card on your behalf. It's something that you have to do yourself. So if they're offering that for a fee, that's another big red flag. And another con, which is a big one in a lot of different areas, is one where someone calls you claiming to be your bank, saying that your account is at risk or that there's been suspicious behavior identified on your card, and they're asking you to provide your bank card number and your password. I can promise you, your bank is never going to ask you for that information over the phone. Uh, they're your bank. They already have your account details. They don't need to be asking you for that pertinent information. So that should be a big red flag for you. And again, much like some of the previous slides that we've seen here, saying no isn't rude. It's empowering and it helps to keep you and your loved ones safe. And that's important um, because con artists are experts in bullying, intimidating, using coercion, and they're great at this over the phone. So don't let your good manners get in the way of standing up to them. Make sure that you tell them you're not interested. And the beauty about telephones is that you have the benefit of being able to just click a button and hang up. Uh, be sure that you're suspicious about good deals that seem too good to be true. And if you're concerned about your bank account, if someone is calling, claiming to be your bank and saying we've identified suspicious activity or what have you, don't be afraid to hang up on them. Then call your bank directly using the bank's actual phone number that would be on one of your statements or on the back of your debit card, and contact them and ask them directly if there has been actual activity that's been documented on your accounts. And you can register for an actual do not call list by visiting the website that's on the slide here. And this slideshow will be available for you folks. So I won't linger on the slide there, but you will be able to get that information. So here's a pretty popular one, the relative in trouble. So Joe answers the phone, and then a female voice goes, Grandpa. And of course, by reflex, Joe will go, Laura. And now he's provided the name of his granddaughter. So now the fraudster will go, yes, Grandpa, it's Laura. I'm in the hospital and I need you to wire me $10,000 right away. Don't tell my parents, they'll be so mad. Joe isn't sure what to do, but he wants to help his grandchild. And on this one, I'm going to touch quickly on a personal story because I actually had this happen to my mother. And this was back when I was still an RCMP officer. And ironically, I was on duty. And of course, my mother is from out in New Brunswick, so I have no immediate contact with her. But she called me late at night one evening. And when I picked up the phone, she goes, oh, you're okay? And I said, yeah, of course I'm okay. Why do you ask? And she said, well, I just got a call from someone claiming to be you. So this person called my mother. And as soon as she answered, they did that exact thing. They said, Mom. And of course, being her only son, she goes, Sean. And the person goes, yeah, it's Sean. Listen, I'm stuck in Edmonton. I got into a fight with someone downtown. I've been arrested by the police. I need $5,000 to be bailed out. Can you send me some money? And of course, my mother, wanting to help her son, she said, well, yeah, for sure, I can. Do you need me to transfer it to your account? And he says, well, I can't because they took my wallet from me when I got arrested. And then my mom asked, she says, well, you kind of sound different. Why does your voice sound so different? He said, well, during the fight, my nose got broken. So with the swollen nose and my sinuses, this is why I sound different. And I don't have my wallet. So can you go downtown and wire the money to me? And she says, yeah, what do I need to do? So this unknown male gave her all the instructions to go down to Western Union and to provide $5,000 and send it over. And she didn't know where the Western Union was. So she went next door to talk to her neighbor about it and ask where it was. And when the neighbor asked her why, and she told them, she said, that doesn't sound right. Maybe you should call your son back. Well, I can't call him back. He's in jail and he probably doesn't have a cell phone. And the neighbor urged her, said, call the cell phone. If it wasn't him, he'll pick up his phone. And that's what she did. And she got me. So I had her report to the police, but of course, with some random number, there was no way to identify who the caller was. So they'll often call seniors posing as a relative in trouble, often a grandchild. And this is the tactic that they'll use. They'll get you to guess the first name. And once you filled in the blank with a name, now that person has that information, they'll use it. The caller will usually say that they're in some kind of legal or financial trouble, and they'll plead with you to wire them money. Sometimes there'll be another person involved. So in some scenarios, so for the one that my mom dealt with, there could potentially be a second person that will come on the phone and go, "Yes, miss, this is the police. Your son has been arrested. He needs the money wired to him to be bailed out." And that just helps to confirm the authenticity of the story, right? And then the caller will usually give clear directions on how to get and wire the money. And the caller will often ask you not to tell someone. Now, as you see on this slide here, con artists will target seniors because you're the anchors of your family, and you should be asking the caller personal questions that only the real person would know. So, as opposed to calling out a name, where if someone picks up the phone and they say "mom" instead of saying "Sean," my mother should have said, "Who is this? Who am I speaking to?" And if it were me, obviously I'd go, "Well, it's your son, it's Sean." But don't fill in the blank for them, because every little bit of information that you give them is now information that they have to use against you. Asking personal questions that only the real relative would know, this allows you to verify the authenticity of the call. And then, no matter what, follow that path that my mother took, where after the fact, once you've hung up, call the relative back on the number that you know them at to confirm whether it was them that called or not. So, mail scam. So, Maggie gets a letter in the mail telling her that she's won a car in a contest, but she can't claim her prize unless she sends $1,000 to the address on the letter to cover the taxes. Maggie could sure use a new car. Surely sending a letter to the address or asking for more details couldn't hurt, right? So, what would be the red flags with this one? Well, first, the letter would be from someone or from an organization that you don't know. One good example is at least once a month, I get an email from a sender identifying themselves as Shoppers Drug Mart telling me that I won a free gift card. It's kind of difficult to win something that you haven't signed up for. And that's what will usually happen is the letter will say that you've won a prize or a sweepstakes or a lottery. It may say that you've inherited money from someone you don't know. In some cases, there may even be a fake check enclosed in the envelope. And usually it's followed up by you being asked to transfer money or send a check or call a particular number. And if you do any of those things, that's where they kind of start to suck you into the scenario. And the letter will say you get a lot of money if you send a smaller amount in order to cover legal fees or taxes. Okay, some of you may have heard years ago about that scam with the Nigerian prince who has millions upon millions of dollars locked up and they need an account to release it to. And if you let them use your account, they'll send you $100,000 as a reward for helping them out. Okay, this is kind of similar to that. So here are some important tips to protect yourself from a mail scam. You don't pay money in order to win or inherit money. Also, remember that you can't win a contest that you didn't enter or a lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So even if you're not sure if you entered a lottery or sweepstakes, remember that no real lottery or sweepstakes is allowed to ask you for money to collect your prize. So it'll never happen that way. As soon as they say, if you send us this much money, you'll win a massive prize. You also don't pay any funds to receive a real inheritance. A real executor or a trustee can provide you with copies of the will and any court documents that will outline what you're entitled to. And there's no such thing as free money. So anytime you receive something through the mail looking like a check, it will be fake. Once a con artist hooks you, even one time, you're targeted nonstop afterwards because these folks share addresses that have worked where they've managed to reach someone. And I'll also add that mail scam isn't just tangible mail. This can happen through emails and stuff as well. At least with emails, most email servers, you have the ability to block addresses. So that is usually the best route to take. But if you're getting mail scams through traditional mail, you can also contact Canada Post to stop the delivery of certain junk mail to your home. So here's our next scam, romance and dating. So Jennifer's husband passed away 3 years ago, and she's ready to try dating again. After she opens an account on a popular dating website, she begins talking with a handsome man named Dylan, who romances her with flowers and soon confesses his love for her. After a few weeks of whirlwind online courtship, Dylan calls Jennifer, claiming she needs to send him $10,000 for an emergency expense. What are the red flags? I think we can all agree that someone that you've only been involved with for only a few weeks probably shouldn't be asking you for $10,000, whether it's for an emergency expense or not. So, romance scams will typically happen online, and the scammer will quickly claim to have intense romantic feelings for you and talk about big future plans like traveling and getting together. And the scammer will quickly have a crisis and suddenly need money after establishing the relationship with you. Somehow, no one you know has met the person in person, and they may ask you to keep the relationship and the ask for money a secret. And that's a big red flag. Obviously, if you're in a relationship with someone, you want to be able to talk about it with your family and your loved ones. So having someone tell you, well, keep our relationship a secret, that's a big red flag. So, further to that, fraudsters will use isolation to pressure you into making hasty decisions. Make sure that you trust your gut. When in doubt, reach out to someone you trust. And be careful of what information you share. So, some tips to protect yourself: make sure you don't hand out financial information either over email or through an online chat in any forum. Be careful about what kind of personal information you share, because a lot of this can be used against you as well. Make sure you're only using reputable dating websites, and be suspicious when someone you've met recently starts to ask you for money, especially in large amounts. And if they're pressuring you for that money, it can often be a signal of fraud or abuse. So make sure you reach out to people that you know well and trust for their advice and for their input. Okay, and for the next slide here, I'll pass it over to Harvey.
There, I just had to figure out how to use this program here. So I just do want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak to this group today. It's one of the things we like to do here at the Financial Consumer Affairs Authority is provide some advice and um, just allow people to learn a little bit about the frauds and scams that are out there. So we'll just kind of start with this one. So it's Jack and Jane are very active in their local church. One day, a church friend brings his cousin Bob to a church lunch. Bob informs the couple he's trying to set up a new business venture and asks Jack and Jane if they would use their position as respected members of the church to help recruit new investors from the church group. Bob claims that people will be rewarded handsomely and he wants to offer the investment opportunity to people that share his values. So, one of the things I'll ask you, because we will be doing a question and answer later, but to put in mind is in reading this or hearing this particular scam, try to identify the red flags with this. Now, this is a lot more common than we believe or that we wish. Um, in the securities world, uh, this type of uh, situations, what we call an affinity fraud. So it's laid out very well here in the fact that it's a member of a distinct group, whether it be a church group, uh, distinct society, New Canadians. It's a member in there, and the fraud they're conducting is around the other members in this group. And the reason they do this is because it starts with a level of trust. So you always have to be kind of cautious with these um, type of scams because they are a lot more common than we believe. But if you can identify some red flags for this, that would be great. But uh, unfortunately, this does happen frequently. Can we advance that, Sean? So yeah, when we talk spot the scam, we have to be wary of offers that are to an exclusive group. So again, we have perhaps a sports club, we have new Canadians in their own little bit of community. Um, church groups. Not picking on the churches, it's just an easy one to explain. People understand the congregation. What you need to really do is not be pressured into um, committing to investing. Always consult with, either your legal counsel, your bank, your accountant, or your own financial advisor when you're being offered these type of investments. And if you don't have uh, legal counsel representing you or a financial advisor. One of the other things we can always suggest, or we do suggest in the securities division, if you're offered a security or you're offered an investment opportunity and you're really unsure about it, phone my office. I have some wonderful staff here that are more than happy to um, take your questions, and we can't give you advice. We can't tell you whether or not to invest in a product or offer legal advice, but we can tell you whether or not that person is registered to actually sell an investment in Saskatchewan. We'll get into some of those aspects a little later in the presentation, but just want people to be aware the biggest thing you can do is educate yourself and ask for advice from somebody before you commit to your money. So I think it's back to you for a bit, isn't it, Sean?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Harvey. Okay, so moving on to our next example of a scam here. So the next one would be internet scams. And I'm sure it stands to reason everyone can guess that this happens a lot because we live in the age of the internet now. So pretty much everything is done online. So if we look at this scenario, Harold is a movie buff. One day he gets an email from a company with the subject line, download movies for free. Harold clicks on the link in the email and is taken to a website where a flashing pop up ad tells him, click here for free movies. Harold wants to download a movie to watch with his granddaughter and clicks on the button. So, what could be some of the red flags for that? If you take a look at that first subject line up there, you'll notice there's an exclamation line before and after the one, which obviously is grammatically incorrect. And this is something that, especially here in the Consumer Protection Division, that we tell a lot of our consumers that call in with complaints and stuff, that if you see spelling errors, if you see even grammatical errors or something that looks off in the correspondence, then it could potentially be a scam. And we actually recently had a lady that, good on her, we had a complaint from her that we were dealing with. And my investigator sent her an emailed correspondence and had her address written up with one incorrect digit in her postal code. And then he added one accidental letter in the name of the company that she was complaining about. So just those two little things, when she got this email and she had opened it, which is also a problem if you believe that it's a scam. We'll get to that in a moment. But to her credit, when she saw these spelling errors with her postal code and the name of the company, she printed off the letter and she mailed it to our office by traditional mail with a little post-it note saying, I found these spelling errors, and she had circled them. She says, I want to confirm this came from you guys and isn't a fraudulent letter. So good on her. She actually took that step and she caught something that a lot of people likely would have overlooked. If I receive a letter from someone, if I've gotten a letter, I might not be looking to see if my postal code was correct. So that was fantastic. She actually took some proper steps there. Because fraudsters can send a link to a scam pop up ad through any email or through any website that you might visit. And these pop up ads can promise free products or great deals, things that might entice you to actually click on them. And then once you do, there's a whole bunch of different things that can happen. They can upload viruses to your device or your computer. They can scan your computer and take off any information you might have on there. So it's important to be wary of these unsolicited offers in your email inbox. Scammers will randomly target email addresses hoping for a response. And if you click a pop-up ad or you even open some of these fraudulent emails, it can allow a scammer to install a virus on your device that will allow them access to your personal information. So here's some of the things that you should be doing if you think that you've got a fraudulent email. So you should delete the suspicious looking emails immediately. You should close any pop-up ads that you get without clicking on the ad. You should increase your email spam protection. So any email server that you use will have the ability to block certain types of emails, send things to junk mail folders, things of that sort. And anything that you're signing up for, the website address will have that HTTPS, not just HTTP. So the S signifies that it's a secure, verified website. So you want to make sure that you beef up your email spam protection. And that HTTPS is especially important if you're planning on making a purchase online, because any of the payment pages should have that S on the end of the URL or at the beginning of the URL, sorry. Okay, and next here, we're going to look at some cryptocurrency things. So Harvey, I'll put it back over to you.
Okay, yeah, cryptocurrency. I imagine everybody, whether or not you're familiar with it or yourself, hold cryptocurrency. It's always in the media. Um, it's very popular. It's talked about. People hear in the news, you know, huge amounts of returns being made off of this. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about it briefly. So cryptocurrency in itself um, is not regulated. It's not like protected in your bank account by deposit insurance, etc. So cryptocurrency is sort of out there. Um, Now it's not a fiat currency. It's just basically a numeric code um, that's processed by computers, thousands of computers, and verifying transactions around the world. The actual um, cryptocurrency, like I said, it's not regulated. What is regulated on the securities side is two things around cryptocurrency. One is the actual we call the ICO or initial coin offering. That's when these people that want to develop a crypto coin start seeking investors' money in order to do the development. Now, of course, that is considered an investment, so that was something that would be regulated. The second part of it is uh, quite frequently there are platforms, we call them. They're electronic platforms. You log into them with your computer and you can trade your cryptocurrency, you know, your Bitcoin for Ethereum or back and forth and things. Um, those platforms themselves are also regulated. So any regulated business in the fact of anybody providing advice, selling a security, trading for you, or providing the platform needs to be registered in Saskatchewan to do so. At this point, I believe we only have a couple, three companies that are actually licensed to do this type of work, and shouldn't use the word license, it's more registered to do this type of work. Um, there are, at last time I was on a discussion around cryptocurrency, something like 2,300 and different cryptocurrencies out there in the world. Very few are as popular as Bitcoin, and people are familiar with that term. Now, the biggest fraud that's overtaking anything I have seen in my time in investigating with the securities division on the scams and the investment frauds, etc. Nothing that we've seen in the past is surpassing what we're currently seeing with cryptocurrency frauds. Um, it's mind-boggling. Um, the last numbers I heard, now this is a little bit dated, um, we feel that, normally, and this isn't just in our securities regulator, but fraud in general, and we'll refer you off to them a little bit later, but there's the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. And I believe since the start of COVID, the complaints going to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center are, threefold increase. And we've gone from tens of millions of dollars lost to fraudulent activity, and they're now well into the hundreds of millions annually. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that, if you hold cryptocurrency itself, um, you know, that's your choice to hold it. If you trade it, make sure you're trading cryptocurrency with a registered firm. Um, our biggest fraud is occurring around these platforms that claim to make you huge returns on your cryptocurrency, etc. And for us regulators, particularly in the securities world across Canada, because we work very close with each jurisdiction across Canada, enforcing securities law and conducting investigations. Um, you really need to get second advice, and you really need to make sure that people that are contacting you either by cold calls or emails, or if you just happen to be Googling investment opportunities on the internet and you suddenly get pop-up ads for, some trading of cryptocurrency platform and you sign up for an account, etc. You just need to be very, very cautious about that. Um, it's probably something I try to sell the most to people is exercise caution, get second opinions. When in doubt, like my previous statement, um, phone us, phone my securities division here. Either myself or one of my investigators will at least hear you out and they can verify whether or not that particular company is registered to do business in Saskatchewan. The other thing I'd like to point you to, and I did notice that we had placed or posted our uh, website address up. I hope everybody takes an opportunity to look at this. We do two things here to try to prevent, more fraud from happening in a public interest. One is if we have enough evidence, we can cease trade a company. And of course, there's a news release, and that goes out. It's on our website, etc. But also with a lot of these companies, particularly around cryptocurrency, we do investor alerts early on, hoping that we can protect people from losing money to these. Um, so it's good. It's a good practice to check our website or just Google the name of the company. If there's an investor alert or there's been a cease trade order issued, it will populate there, and you can see that. It may not be from Saskatchewan, but it could be from the European Union. It could be from the U.S., etc. Because uh, these scams are not normally found on within our borders or the U.S. borders. Most of these run out of foreign countries. A lot of them run out of countries that really we don't have open um, contacts with and can trace money. So I'm just adding a little more security because cryptocurrencies became a huge problem for us in our division. And um, check with us or get some advice if you're approached by this type of thing. I think we could probably go on. Sean, thanks, Sean. So some of the other things I'd like to talk to you about, and this works with all investments. Um, Really huge takeaway, red flags. If you're asked to keep your investment private or secret, um, promised returns much higher than um, you can even conceive. The investment opportunity is offshore. It's exciting. It's new. Um, and either the company or the person selling it isn't registered. No, this higher than normal returns. We get a lot of complaints and we conduct a lot of investigations where the person was, contacted by email or they clicked on a link and they went somewhere. Um, we've seen them where they've been offered to um, up to earning 100% return on their investment within, you know, 4 weeks or 2 months, uh, 18%, 19% annually. Um, you got to really go back and kind of think of the returns that um, your mutual funds are making or your market securities, and what kind of with a normal what you're earning on those, and if what you're being offered is so exaggerated or so far away from there, you need to consider that as a red flag. That's when you really have to seek some advice either from your financial advisor your lawyer, talk to your bank, and talk to us. Like, um, at least we'll be able to confirm whether or not these people can sell that product in Canada. Registration. I'll just kind of just excuse me for a second. Registration in the securities world. Every company that issues a security has to comply by securities law, and every individual that sells a security needs to be registered with us. This covers two things. Uh, First off, with the issuers themselves, they're required to provide information to the consumer uh, about every aspect of the investment opportunity they're offering. So I know a number of you have probably seen a prospectus from your financial advisor talking about your particular investment. Those are the types of things that total um, laying the cards on the table and showing you this is what you're buying or this is what we're offering you to buy and here's all the particulars around it. So that's the important part. With the salesperson, the reason we have a registration requirement for the people are it's an educational requirement. Not only be registered with us, these dealing advisors or mutual fund dealers, they're required to take substantial amount of education about the products they're selling, about the markets and how they work. Um, we ensure that these people, um, didn't just get out of jail for committing a fraud. So there's a lot of reasons, and it all kind of boils back down to public protection. We protect the markets in Saskatchewan, and our focus is on protecting those that invest in the markets. So um, I think we could probably move ahead from there. Okay, I guess I was going to cover this one, Sean, but not something we see so much in the securities division. Um, Now, I can kind of talk a little bit where this overlays into the securities division, but it talks about key takeaways, warning signs for loved ones and caregivers. You watch for a new friend starts making financial decisions or suddenly has power of attorney on your loved ones or those that you care for. Suspicious signatures on checks, changes in banking patterns. Particularly watch the behavioral changes such as depression or fear. And I'm going to touch a little bit on this, just a couple slides down the show here, but just wanted to kind of bring this up at this time. Um, if we could just advance again, Sean. Thank you. So kind of into that wrap up, and then we're going to talk about a couple cases, then do some question and answer. Sean touched on this earlier in his presentation about you don't have to pay money to claim a prize. Don't send money to people you don't know. A legitimate company, that includes the CRA, the police, whatever, will not ask for gift cards as payment. Always talk to someone you trust. And the biggest quote we ever make around here is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So I just want to kind of expand on this slightly before we move on. How this works in the securities world. Now, this is one of the huge, we're going to change the aspect on a little bit. In all the crypto frauds that we are currently experiencing, people go in, they get an account on one of these crypto trading platforms, they go and buy some crypto or some cryptocurrency, whether it be Bitcoin, whatever, and they transfer it to this platform and away it goes. So there's a couple problems with this. And I just want to really identify these real quick. First off is they will do this and their initial investment might be $250 to $500. Then they will see that their account is building and building, and with days they could be up to suddenly their account is valued at $20,000. And so the people running this fraud will come back to him and say, well, if you can only invest another 5,000 or 10,000, look at all these earnings you're getting. So um, just because people want to believe they're making such great returns on their investment, um, they go ahead and send some more money away someplace overseas, and they start watching their account. And of course, it looks like their account is growing and substantially growing. Then they decide, um, I need to take a little money out of my account. So, excuse me, the first time, um, they might get a small amount back and it'll go on, but the company will then, get them invest more and more money with them to the point where they actually want to start drawing out these vast amounts of um, profit they'd made from this investment. They'll then be met with a lot of roadblocks. The first roadblock they'll throw up is, well, we can't send you your money back. And this covers something that Sean stated earlier. You have to first send us, and I've seen them anywhere from 20 to 50 some $1,000 for taxes or, for different things. And once we have that money, then we can, return your investment money. Well, all they're really doing is ending off the fraud because they know you're going to send them the money, or they hope you will send them the money. And once they have that money, um, they'll just basically disappear. So, so I just want to kind of touch on that because it's um, just all too common, and we're just trying to provide this information um, so that may be able to help people in this group. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to talk about this one, and I'm not going to read it word for word. This was actually a case I worked on, a number of years ago, but it's one that really kind of stuck with me. I had two brothers lived up in northern part of Saskatchewan. They'd farmed together all their lives, never been married. Um, they had done really good. They had a very successful farming operation. So I don't want to get into the details of how they met the fraudster, but I can say that these two gentlemen, they had a niece that lived on a farm not too far from them. And her husband and her started noticing some very unusual transactions or things the brothers were talking about. So they started to piece it together. Then they contacted us, and it looked like an investment scam. So it took about, oh, probably close to a year in order to get these fellows to actually sit down and talk to me. Um, they were very reluctant at the time. When we finally got them to sit down and talk, um, realized quickly the amount of transactions or investments they'd made was a substantial amount of money, and over about 20, the last 20 years, because this thing had been going on for 20 years. Uh, these two fellows had given this roster approximately $1 million, and he had a really unusual method. Um, he was a friendly enough fellow when he sort of befriended these two individuals. He'd almost come to their farm bi-weekly, sometimes maybe not for a month, but he was regularly there. And he would either, um, offer them some investment or say they had, 'cause he had all kinds of different investment things going. And one week he might get $1,000. 2 weeks later, he might get another 10,000. And the amounts varied anywhere from like the $1,000 minimum up to, $50,000. He would take the check that was written. He would immediately go to the bank in that small Saskatchewan town, cash a check, and have it turned into cash, or turned into a wire transfer it to a different account that didn't belong to him. Um, I can remember talking to him and taking statements, and I really asked him, like, why did you keep giving money? Like, he never gotten any money back. It was interesting because the fellow said, you know, they wanted to believe that their money was safe. It had not been stolen. And they were scared if they cut him off from giving him more money, he may not come back. And if he never came back, they would never get their money back. So um, it was a very good example of two very honest men that made a deal on a handshake, um, conned by somebody. Fortunately, the individual that perpetrated this particular fraud did, I believe it was 5.5 years in a federal penitentiary. So um, that's part of it. Can we advance, Sean, please? Hmm. This wasn't a file that I worked on, but it was really interesting. So we had a 63-year-old um, widow, and she was convinced by somebody she considered a friend or an investor friend, and was convinced to sell her farm and then to take that money and invest in his company, and he would get her a great return and provide cheap holidays through a travel company she would invest in, on and on. So she did. She sold her land, mortgaged her family home, um, invest invested the money in what she believed was a safe and secure investment operated by this fellow. Um, so the only thing she really actually got out of this was the fellow that stole the money used her money to fund himself and his family to the Caribbean trips, to Mexico, to Belize, um, his own property holdings. So it was an out and out theft. He just defrauded this lady who thought she was or was a friend, and no rhyme or reason. The last I knew, and it stated in the last line, she'd moved to an apartment in Brandon, Manitoba. The farm had been located in eastern Saskatchewan, and she was working as a clerk in a store in Brandon, and no longer had a vehicle, and either walked or rode a bus to work because this individual totally destroyed her life. And I just wanted to um, just bring this one up because these things have devastating impacts on people. And this is not isolated either. We've seen regularly where investors in a fraud, just in Saskatchewan, in investment fraud, lost well over $1 million. It's far too frequent, and we like these opportunities so we can educate people and kind of open them up to really thinking about asking the questions. Don't rush into it. Look for red flags. When in doubt, from my office. So I think I've got one more slide here, I believe. This was an interesting one. Actually was one of my files events. Was quite easy to talk about. Um, it wasn't a huge loss as far as what we see. It was $50,000, but that $50,000 for this particular widow, living here in Regina in one of the senior complexes, that was a huge amount of money to her. It was absolutely. It was like it was just devastating to her. But she lived in an apartment complex here, and um, she was friends with the neighbor across the hall and everything. So then, and they were both, late 80s, early 90s. So the son of her neighbor moved in with the neighbor, and he was just in his, I think, mid 60s at the time. That's what the side said, but I think around 64 or 65. And of course, the two neighbors had gotten along and coffeed back and forth and played cards. So the son became involved with that. And it went on and on. He started to spend more time with her, more time, and he would entertain her and he'd talk about his successful businesses, investments, stories of all his travel and everything. So it developed over a number of months. But this lady's actually started thinking, well, this young man, 65, has an interest in me, and so it really could have a little bit of a twist of a romance scam or whatever. She was quite embarrassed about this when we finally, interviewed her and talked. But initially, he didn't seek investments. He just started getting her to write checks to him to support various charities and travel and different things. So he might be supporting a charity, but he'd have her write the check to him, and he would make sure that the charity got the money. Um, Very soon after that, she started to give what was very limited assets to this man. Um, One of the red flags here, of course, was he reminded her constantly not to tell her children, because she needed to save it as a surprise so that when she became really wealthy, she'd be surprising them all. Um, this one we weren't lucky on in the fact that $50,000 loss was so substantial for this lady. But this individual to fled to Eastern Canada. Um, he was sanctioned by us, and so just these things are just too common. And I guess I just continue to repeat myself, but it's um, really important to ask questions and just don't rush into something, um, and just you know seek professional advice. So I think as far as the presentation portion of providing information, we can flip to the next page. So, what to do if you are a victim of fraud? So, what you really need to do is anything you have collected during the course of that interaction, whether it be recollections of phone calls, telephone numbers, emails, um, uh, all that information, collect that information, keep it. What you should be doing with any communications anytime you're dealing with your finances or even with your own individual advisors is, you keep a record of what your investments are, etc. Um, you need to report it to the financial institution. So it's good to report it to the bank. Contact the police. If you've been defrauded, you need to go to the police. And also, um, I always recommend reporting to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, and there's a number there for it. Canadian Anti-Fraud Center is ran between the RCMP and the Ontario provincial police, and it's really a repository um, for fraud complaints. Not so much that they actually investigate it, that's referred back or left up to the police, but it allows us to track and see the frauds that are occurring in Canada that aren't just isolated to Saskatchewan. We may have a victim in Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec might have victims, and um, it's very good in seeing where the frauds are originating from, whether they're coming out of Costa Rica or the Marshall Islands, or lately we've had a lot of lost money going to Kuwait. And talk to us if it's an investment fraud and it's regarding an investment. Now, um, we would ask that you speak to us because we will investigate that as well. Um, so I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add in regards to this particular slide, Sean?
Well, I think you kind of covered it off nicely, Harvey. Even with some of the licensing regimes that I brought up earlier, like you may have door-to-door salesmen that you may suspect are running a scam or are performing fraudulent activities, and that's where it becomes important to report those things to my division as well, right? Or vehicle dealerships that might be doing something fraudulent. Just because they are licensed doesn't mean that they won't necessarily do something fraudulent. So scams and frauds are inherently a criminal matter that would necessarily be investigated by the police, but there will always be an element that me and Harvey's respective divisions can look into with that respect.
I do have one thing to add that I forgot to add until you sort of reminded me there. Um, Something we're seeing lately, like I've talked a lot about um, money going overseas or whatever. Um, in the past, it frequently was through the use of a wire transfer from your bank to a receiving bank um, in Europe, um, South America, anywhere in the world, China. Uh, and that still occurs. But what we've been seeing lately is where these fraudsters will say, okay, well, to make your investment, you need to get a cryptocurrency wallet, you need to buy cryptocurrency, then transfer it to us. The problem with cryptocurrency, um, it's anonymous. You can't, if you have cryptocurrency and you transfer those funds to somebody else, it's virtually impossible to identify who that someone else is on the other side. It's that anonymous. The one thing I really want to caution people about, because this is a recent twist to occurring with these cryptocurrency frauds, is um, two things. They will ask to be provided access to your computer, so you'll go on a link or whatever. Um, they'll log into your computer. They may have you log into your bank, and they will help you purchase cryptocurrency, or they'll help you transfer it. We've also seen lately that they're advancing so much that recently we had uh, a bank account opened in Eastern Europe, and our victim in Saskatchewan, where he allowed them into the computer, and they actually ended up opening an account in this individual's name in Eastern Europe and transferring from his account to his account in Eastern Europe, and the money was gone, and nobody has any idea who the actual fraudster is. So I just wanted to bring that up. So we would really love the opportunity now. If you have questions for either Sean or I, that we'll try to answer them the best we can.
I've got some questions sort of in the queue here. um, I've been getting an email saying I have hacked you and I immediately delete it, but how did they get my workable email?
There can be a lot of ways that they got it, either from mailing lists that unfortunately get sold if you signed up for something online. Some companies will unfortunately sell their email lists. Sometimes it can be completely random. Sometimes it might be accidental through a family or friend. It might be something that you put on your computer they were able to pick up on. There are a lot of different ways that they can get that, and they're phishing, right? So, and that's phishing, PHISING. So they're phishing scam where they're trying to get information out of you by telling you these things through email. It's like one of the common scams I dealt with when I was a police officer was you would be working on your computer and all of a sudden you get this screen that would pop up and lock your computer, and the screen would say, we've identified criminal behavior on your computer, and if you don't send X amount of dollars to us within the next 24 hours, there's a warrant out for your arrest and we'll come and get you. And they're claiming to be either CRA or the RCMP. And your computer is literally locked. I've had this happen to myself. I had to end up doing a backup restore to my computer to like a month prior to get my computer back to the state it was before this pop-up came up, and I have no idea how it happened. It might have been something fraudulent that I had in an email that I didn't even know was there. So they can get your email address through a variety of different sources.
And how do you close a pop-up ad without actually clicking on it?
uh well, I'm not the most techie proficient, but I know of two ways. One would be to click the X that's up in the right hand corner. Some pop-up ads will have that. If it's a pop-up ad that doesn't have it, you can do the whole Control Alt Delete to bring up all your windows, and or bring up your task manager, and you should be able to close the window out with that. If not, if all else fails, I would recommend shutting down your computer and rebooting it. The pop-up won't be there when you reopen.
What should you do if you did respond to an email thinking that it was genuine, then you got a response, and then you realized it was a scam and stopped responding? She put both emails into her junk folder and also deleted the trash can. Is she safe now, or does she need to do something else?
From a professional standpoint, I don't know that I can answer that because I'm not a techie expert. I know that for myself personally, what I do in incidents like that, because sometimes some of these emails are very convincing, and there is the potential that you'll open it without recognizing that it's a scam until you've got it open. So having a really good antiviral program on your computer is a good first step. But when in doubt and when you're not sure, have your computer checked and analyzed by an actual tech company that provides those services, right? Like Geek Squad or something of that sort. They can scan your computer for you and identify those things.
Does anyone have any more questions for Sean and Harvey? Don't see any more coming. Oh, here's another one. Can you recommend a good antivirus program?
That's a good question. Personally, my home computer, I use Norton antivirus. It's what I have been using, and it's been pretty good. I get a report on it that tells me how many different things that it's blocked from my computer that are considered harmful. Like I say, I'm old school. My brain still functions on Windows 95, so I couldn't tell you if it's actually blocking something viral or if it's just that it thinks it is. But so far, I found that Norton has been pretty good.
Well, thanks so much for all this great information and sharing and coming to do our presentation for us today. And we will have this presentation posted on our website and our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out and watch for the survey to pop up right after the presentation. And thanks so much, everyone, for attending today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.